Hi, in this video we are going to talk about the next few steps that we need to go through to create our holiday graphic that we started on recently. So in this video we'll talk about how to create these little swirls here, as well as the trees and a couple of other things. So the first thing we'll do is we will create these swirls. So over here I'm going to grab my paintbrush tool, and then I need to select the paintbrush that I made. So I made this curly swirly. We covered that in a previous video, I think the first video in the series, so you should know how to do that. If you don't, then go ahead and watch that video again and you should be good to go, because it's a pretty simple process. Okay, so now I'm in my layers palette. I'm just going to create a new layer. So all I'm doing is clicking on the new layer button, and there we go. I can make that little swirly guy on that layer. So if I make it that size, then it's enormous, right? It's filling up way too much room. So I'm just going to step back. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo, and now I need to make my brush smaller. So as you can see, it's way too big right here. All I'm doing right now is hitting my left bracket tool, or you could come up here. So my left bracket tool on my keyboard, I should specify, or you could come up here and you could drag this down till you get a size that you like. I like using my keyboard shortcuts for some of these things because it just makes my life a little bit easier, but it's up to you. So, whoops. I don't want to type that in there, so let's start with 350, see how that looks. So somewhere around 350. This shape is not exactly the same as the one on the sort of source image, but that's okay, because it's pretty close. So that's about right. I might go just a touch bigger, something like that. Okay, so the key here is to make sure you are on a new layer so that you can always change this, and we might rotate it around or resize it a little bit. So I'm just going to click here. And if you'll notice, I didn't choose the correct color before I did that. So make sure you do the same thing, or you don't do the same thing, I should say. So we're going to select our color. So you can either select your color from the color swatches that we created. If you got your theme to show up over here, that's great, and you can use those colors there. All you need to do is click on the color that you want, and that should pop up over here in your foreground color. So you can do that. If for some reason that didn't work for you, you can choose the eyedropper tool and just click on the area of color that you want to use. So if I want to get a red that is similar to the red that they had there, I can click and get my eyedropper tool. So that works for all of these different colors, just so you know. But I'm going to go ahead and use my theme that I had created because I created it for a reason, right? And mine cooperated and yours might not have. So if it didn't, like I said, that's okay. We'll live with it. Okay, so I am on my new layer. I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that in. And actually I'm going to stamp both of these in on the same layer. Normally I like to keep things on separate layers, but just for simplicity, I'm going to put that on the same layer. Okay, so I have that first one stamped in. Second one's going to be stamped in too. So you'll notice we're using a stamping sort of motion with this brush. So I'm just clicking once and letting go of my mouse. That would be opposed to, you know, the traditional sort of brush sort of sweeping motion that you would do with a real paintbrush if it were in your hand, more than likely. But just because of this kind of shape that we created, that's the way we need to do that. Okay, so this is my layer with my swirls in it right here. So I'm going to name this swirls, because there are two of them, right? So those are my left swirls over there. You can see when I toggle the visibility, they turn on and off. So there they are. I'm going to copy this layer. So I'm going to just drag that down, click and drag it down to the new layer button. So now I have two swirls, and you can't see very well when I click the visibility on one, but that other one is layered right on top of the first one. I'm going to grab my move tool again, and I'm just going to slide this over. So I'll slide it over there. And Photoshop now does a decent job of helping me align everything. So now you can see those sort of fuchsia lines showing me that these are all lined up, and that's perfect. So I'll just release my button there, and there we go. But now it's backwards, so we need to kind of get the mirror image of that of my swirls. So to do that, I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. So there we go. Now I have the mirror image. So there are some options in there that you could, if you ever need to. We've talked about some of them, but we haven't really talked about these. So there you go. That's a fun little trick. Makes your life a little bit easier. So there we have those. So I have my swirls and my swirl copy. Sorry. So I could name this actually left swirls. And I'll name this one right swirls, just because it's nice to stay organized. That way you have an easy time finding everything that you need to find and whatnot. Okay, so my next job now is to do the same thing, but with my Christmas tree. So I'm going to create a new layer, first of all. So new layer, and now I'm going to choose my brush tool. But I'm going to go up here and choose my Christmas tree brush. So you'll notice that when I choose that, mine is nice and large. Yours might be the same size. It might not exactly be the same size. Either way is you can make it whatever size you want. Whoops, I'm just going to undo that. Okay, so now I need to decrease the size of my brush. So I'm going to size it down by hitting my left bracket tool. Again, you could do that up here in your options bar. I'm going to get mine fairly close to the original, but the shape of my tree is different, so it won't match up perfectly, but that's not a big deal. Next thing I need to do before I start stamping this in is I need to change my color, because right now it's set to red. So I'm going to go in my colors palette, or my color themes, and I actually lost track of which one I was using for this one because I created so many color themes, so I need to go in and organize those. Okay, so again, I'm on that new layer that I created. I'm just going to stamp in with my brush. So that Christmas tree brush is in there, and if you can see, it is not very opaque. I'm going to just create a new fill layer with black. Whoops, I had a fun pattern chosen there. So I just created a new layer and I filled that in with black. That way I can see what I'm doing. You can do the same thing if you want. So I just created a new layer, new blank layer, filled it in with my paint bucket tool with the solid black. That way I can kind of toggle back and forth and keep track of what I'm doing. So my Christmas tree, the visibility or the opacity on that one is fairly low, which you can leave it like that or you can change that. So that's up to you. If you want to leave it like that, and then we get, I'll toggle back again to see that. Then we get sort of that muted Christmas tree look. That's fine if you want to leave it like that. If you want to add another layer, you could actually probably copy this layer. That might be the easiest. So now I have two of them stacked on top of each other, and now let's toggle back. And now it's getting a little bit more opaque. So you have the flexibility within that little brush there that we created to make that more or less opaque than you want, or however you want. Okay, so I'm gonna merge this new tree layer down. To simplify things, you could just create that layer once. Okay, so if you wanna go for simple, just stamp that tree on there one time, and that's perfect. And now I can stamp on my other trees, but I wanna keep them on separate layers. So I'll hit the new layer button, and then I'm going to reduce the size of my Christmas tree. So I'm hitting the left bracket tool. I'll reduce it a couple times, and I'll stamp that guy in. New layer, stamp that one in. Okay, so again, I'm going to pop in this little black fill layer. I kind of like the way that some of that is opaque. Like this middle tree is a little bit more opaque, and those are a little bit more muted. I kind of like the way that looks. And it's pretty accurate to the original, so we'll go ahead and let that go like that. And I'll put that back on there so I can see what I'm doing. Next thing I'm going to do is I am going to add the little stars on the top of the trees. And just like we did the last time, we can go to our custom shape tool. And I have my star tool already chosen here. And it's going to create that star using my foreground color. So I can see that that's filling right there, and it's pulling it in from right here. Okay, so new layer. I will click and drag, and I'm actually holding the shift key so that it makes it as a nice symmetrical star. If I didn't hold the shift key, I would be able to make a squished star in whichever direction I want to. So I want to keep it sort of a perfectly proportioned star, so that's why I hold the shift key. Like I said, if I release the shift key, I can squish that guy in whichever way I want. I don't want that, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that. Okay, again, new layer, holding the shift key. I'm going to just drag another star. That's good. And I want this star over here to be the exact same as this one. So I'm going to click on my shape that I just created, pull it down to the layers palette, switch to my move tool, and just slide that guy over. So that's one way that you can do that. There are a couple different ways. So there you go. Now you have your trees created and your little swirlies. So we're making some good progress. Let's finish this video up by adding in these little snowballs. So here they have just circles. we are going to use our custom shapes and we are going to add these as tiny little snowflakes. Okay, so I'm going to just create a new layer, go to my custom shape tool again, where we got our star from. I'm going to scroll until I see a snowflake, and I know they are in here. There they are. So here are my snowflake options. If you don't see those, go ahead, click on that little gear icon and click on all and hit OK, and then it will replace these shapes and you should be able to get to that. So I am just going to click, holding my shift key, drag. These are hard to see right now. Oop, I probably made that as a green. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to switch. I'm going to make this white. Click there, yes. Okay, so now I'm ready. Again, I'm on a new layer. I'm gonna click while holding shift, and I'm just going to create a tiny little snowflake, and you can't see it. I'll zoom in so you can actually see it. So you can kind of see it. We're seeing the little edges around there. There, now that I clicked off of it, you can see it. Okay, you can create these all on separate layers if you want, but since there's so many of them, you might want to just create these all on the same layer, and that's fine for this. I wouldn't recommend it for most things, but for these little snowflakes, I would say that is perfectly fine. So I am just creating snowflakes where I see these little, they have them as kind of just orbs or little balls. So I'll just keep doing that. Fill this up with my snowflakes. Some are big, some are little. They're not all exactly the same size, just so you know. And that's how we want yours to be. A little variety in there is good. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom out, Command and the minus sign. Okay, so let me turn this on again, and there we go. So we're doing pretty good. We're making some good progress with this. All right, so in the next video, we'll cover the next few steps. I think that's enough for right now. All right, if you have questions, let me know. Thanks.